Right, so panel. From opening government, we think that um, we regret the narrative that the welfare should be a safety net rather than a right, and we think that welfare of people should be a right that is appealed to them. So essentially, we think that poor people are poor not because of their options or how they choose to live their lives, and this is excluding some outliers that we get, but because of how the kind of states that they find themselves in and how those states do not ensure social and economic mobilities to them. So we think that the welfare of the state is something which is a supreme law and one which must be protected, and the only kind of protection it gets is not when narrative is pushed that it is a safety net but it's a right. So we'll be showing the problematic nature of this, and secondly on the narrative of wealth, how the narrative of welfare as a safety net has made welfare merely a privilege and not something that governments can be accountable to provide, and narrative, how the narrative has perpetuated to sustain the exploitativeness of capitalism and ensure that capitalism doesn't come to an end, and also very importantly how it is bad for third world countries. So firstly, we think that the welfare of the state is something which is a supreme law, and that is a rhetoric which is one which is very, very important. Why? Because we believe that the primary reason for which we submit our rights, and that's what essentially happens in state creation, right? So you submit certain rights, and then there's a social contract theory that exists whereby you find reciprocity in your responsibility. So the state uses the surpluses of some to cater for the excesses of some other people or others. So there's a right that exists when you become a member of the state, and this right is that the state must provide for your welfare, because the state realizes the fact that there's no equality in the society, not everybody can be equal, and people are going to provide for in this society. So certain individuals should be provided for essentially. So we think that it is a right which should be demanded for, and we believe that narrative of welfare as a safety net, as something which has reduced welfare to a mere privilege, because when the state gives out welfare, it's seen as giving out welfare out of their magnanimity, and that's why many third world countries can run out of providing welfare for their citizens within their state. And we think that when safety nets when welfare becomes just a safety net program, you cannot demand and obligate the government to actually perform them and provide for them, and it becomes worse off in third world countries rather. So we think essentially it's also very important to engage how narrative is perpetuated to sustain the exploitation of capitalism. So we think that, as I've said earlier, some of the things welfare is some of the things that we should enjoy as a matter of right as citizens, and this has become like a privilege. So this keeps citizens and perpetually keeps them in servitude, particularly when this thing is provided. So when even employers discharge these duties, they discharge them. When employers discharge this, they discharge this not as duties but as privileges being given to them. And also, we think it's very important that welfare has been put as safety net to ensure that exploitation of capitalism is something which does not end. Because when we continue the exploitation of capitalism, but tell people that we give them this privilege, we ensure that they still continue having these welfare programs, healthcare, and all of this. It prevents people from having a revolution, a social revolution, an economic revolution, to fight the continuous exploitativeness of capitalism. And we think this is something which the narrative as a safety net has perpetuated.
Yes. Okay, so if it's a right, clearly everyone is going to enjoy this by virtue of citizenship. Do you think it's fair for the rich to enjoy welfare as well as the poor?
We think that if we can create a situation whereby is created as a right and people are allowed to enjoy it, even if the rich are also going to enjoy it, then it's something which is very, very important. As long as the poor get to benefit and enjoy this, we think it's very, very good, as opposed to the kind of situation whereby, I'll take in a minute, as opposed to the kind of situation whereby we do not even have any enjoyment of rights by the poor people. So we think that this is essentially something which is even worse off for third world countries, and third world countries are places whereby there are more people who need welfare as welfare more than even the rich countries that we have, because when welfare becomes something that is a safety net and not a right, you allow government to rescind from it. You allow very corrupt government to rescind from it, not just because they cannot, but because of this narrative being perpetuated, and there is no serious activism to uphold it because it is not a right. So when we see third world countries rescinding from rights that people are supposed to enjoy, we see activism being pushed for them to be obligated to their rights. But you do not get this kind of traction when you do not allow this as a right. So you see many third world countries though including it as in their constitution, but saying it's a social economic right that is not justiciable, and getting out of it through some things that the term progressive realization. So this is something which is very, very bad. Even if third world countries cannot provide for their citizens, we think that if it is created as a right, it is something which they are going to aspire for, and then we can hold corrupt officials at stake for not providing this. Yes, clarification.
Is it your contention that people have an intrinsic right to welfare, irrespective of their willingness or their capacity to work?
Oh yeah, it's our contention that people have rights to welfare. As I've said earlier from my characterization, I was talking about like how rights are gotten and derived from the state when we give up certain things, and that's how all rights are derived from the state. So whether or not you do certain things or you put in certain obligations, as long as you put in the primary obligation to the state, being a member of that state and giving up certain things, how the state wants it to be given up, you should be given that right as a matter of right. So we think that whether you work or not, people should be given the rights to welfare. We think it's very important for poor people. But more importantly, as I was talking earlier about third world countries and how we think this is very, very problematic for them, we believe that when it is created as a right, there's more activism, there's more progression of it being pursued as a right. So when we shift the narrative from it being a safety net to a right, we ensure that there's an accountability, we ensure that people are able to gain from this, we ensure that everybody is provided for everybody within a citizen, if the person is a citizen within a country. So we believe that rights should be accrued to people irrespective of whether they are rich or whether they work or whether they do certain things. Rights are derived from the obligations that you've given to the state. Rights are derived from how you do all of these things. And if you have achieved all of this, then it should be given as a right, and it doesn't matter whether or not you are rich or you are poor. So I really believe that because of the fact that poverty is created based on the state preventing social and economic mobilities for individuals, and the narrative of welfare being a safety net has been perpetuated and is ensuring that states are not held accountable to create social and economic mobilities for their citizens. We think this is a very, very bad thing. So essentially, we've told you from opening government how the welfare of the state is the supreme law, how the narrative of welfare as a safety net has made it a privilege and not something that people should states should aspire to and give their citizens as a matter of right, and how it has perpetuated and maintained the sustenance of capitalism, and in the end, how it is something which is very, very bad for third world countries. We are very proud to propose.